Hello.
Like an acapella group.
Hello.
Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
Hi, guys.
Good to have you.
Today we're going to talk about dog fights.
Yes.
Specifically, the times that we've gotten bitten.
Right.
And reflecting back on
what we could have changed.
Yeah, why it happened, what we could have changed, what we learned from it moving forward, that type of thing.
Quick disclaimer is that we're not bragging about being bitten.
I'm not proud of these.
No.
Yes.
We're not
Anyway.
in any way, shape, or form wearing being bitten by a dog as a badge of honor.
No.
It was a nice reflecting back on things that we could have handled differently and what we have learned moving forward.
And to show that we're not perfect either.
Yes. If you're getting bit a lot as a dog trainer, I think you need to reevaluate.
This is true.
You need to reevaluate and see what's going on. And yeah, I do see it. Sometimes I think it's newer trainers. I think they tend to like flex. Like, oh, I just got bit by this dog.
Yeah.
Look at this. Because I think maybe they feel like it sends the message that like they're working with like the tough ones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Handle anything.
Oh yeah. It's not the flex that you think it is.
No.
At all. It's especially when you're a dog trainer and you're supposed to be like gathering as much information, being able to read the dog's body language, and doing all those things. Like, you really shouldn't be getting bit.
Right.
Very often. Shit happens. But
And that's what we're going to talk about.
yes. Who wants to go first? Who can think of like the first? Let's talk about the first time we got bit. Who wants to go first?
I will go first.
Okay.
If you guys don't mind.
No, go for it. Take
So, when I was in Kennel Tech, I was running some dogs, and looking back, I was trying to run 2 dogs at the same time. So I opened 2 crates at the same time, and this little dog we had at the time came right out and went directly into the second dog's crate, and a big fight ensued inside the crate. So I had to reach in, get it, and what felt like was like, I want to say like 20 minutes of dog fighting, and it was probably realistically like 2.
Yeah.
But I was trying to separate these 2 dogs. They were completely latched onto each other. We had to go into the break room, and I ended up being able to separate them by putting a chair on top of one of them and leaning on the chair, and the dog finally got off. And as I was controlling her and getting her out of the room, I looked down and the other dogs latched onto my leg. And this
That's
was all
fucking traumatizing.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard you fully tell this entire story.
Yes.
Like, I know that I've heard like bits and pieces of it, and I obviously
Yeah.
know the aftermath.
Yes.
But like,
And I was alone at the time, so I had no additional support to help me. And as I was leaving the room, I realized the dog was latched onto my leg, and I was kind of like dragging it because I was not going to let this second dog go again and go at it. And it was quite traumatizing. I finally had the dog let go, and then it latched onto my leg again. And this was all not that the dog was trying to attack me directly. It wasn't at me. It was all of the chaos ensued, just had this dog redirect on me several times. Finally got the fight separated and got everything under control. There was no major injuries with the dogs. I was just the one majorly injured. I had a puncture in the back of my leg and on my thigh. And unfortunately, went to urgent care, sought medical care for it, and it ended up getting extremely infected. And that infection traveled up my leg to my thigh. And my doctor's like, let's just do a little quick, cute MRI, on it. So I did the MRI, and he calls me and he said, you need to come in for surgery immediately. So that bite left unattended. I was on antibiotics and everything. But for about 2 weeks, the swelling was coming up, and I didn't go back to the doctor. So if you get bitten, go to the doctor and really have it looked at thoroughly. I went in for surgery, and that small little dog bite ended up sending me to the hospital for about a month. I had a wound vac. It was an extremely traumatic experience because the hospital stay was around when COVID happened, so I could not have any visitors. So it was a very lonely time, and it hurt very, very bad. I had 14 staples in my leg to remove the infection and 2 surgeries.
What did that entail, like, to remove an infection? Was it like tissue that they had to take? Okay.
I'm not sure the actual medical term. I want to say, don't quote me on this, it was like mitosis or something.
Okay.
That was the term that they used. And I had to have that tissue removed, and the infectious disease department visited me in the hospital every day because they were monitoring how infected it got and if it was more severe to the point where I could have lost my leg.
Okay.
So that whole experience was like very eye-opening to me.
Yeah.
And I ended up coming back to work, and I'm totally fine now. I still have some tissue damage and some pain in my leg, but for the most part, I'm able to function normally. Looking back, I should not have got open 2 crates at once. I obviously know that. It was in the morning, the dogs were really excited. I was trying to move quickly. And in retrospect, I should have slowed down and taken each dog out individually. So just looking at the whole picture, I'd say look for times that are really highly arousing for dogs. Getting out of the crate, going outside in the backyard, you coming home, dinner time, these hyper arousal times that they can kind of turn on each other. So as we know, that pendulum from excitement to aggression swings very, very quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was
especially being there like by yourself too.
Yeah.
You know, if you know you're alone, taking extra precautions that you may not have taken if you knew there were other people there too. You know?
And even like the redirecting too, you know, that's something where it's like there was nothing you did wrong, but because of again that arousal, that dog redirected towards you. And as well as an important note of, even if it's just a small puncture wound or whatever, you know, a lot of people like to be tough and they're like, oh, well, he barely punctured it, it's fine or whatever, and that's what can happen. The infections tend to be worse, obviously, than in your case especially, than the actual bite itself. And people like to blow it off, but they don't realize how much bacteria goes into that bite, you know, so that's something else.
Yeah. And
also, what a badass. That you handled that on your own.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was, at the time, I remember just, it really did feel like it was, 20 minutes, but it probably, I broke it up pretty quickly, and...
Especially if they had no damage to each other, you definitely got it under control very fast.
Yeah,
I think there was, scrapes and scratches, but nothing really significant.
Yeah.
And I still see the dog that bit me to this day, and we're okay now. We've mended our relationship. I do not blame her.
Yeah.
She and I are cool. So that was my first bite experience.
That was your first. Your first. That's wild. What an induction into.
I was on crutches after the math because my leg wasn't strong enough to support me.
Gosh.
And I just was limping around, and we had stairs in my house, and for 2 months I did not climb my stairs.
So, I mean, dog trainers have literally quit on less than that.
Yeah.
And the fact that was because something I think is interesting too is the mental ramifications of getting bit afterwards as well. My most recent bite that I got, I was kind of concerned, which I'll talk about eventually at some point. I was honestly my biggest concern about it was I'm worried that I'm gonna be hesitant now. That this is gonna impede my ability to do what I need to do.
Yeah.
Because that's not necessarily something you can even control. You know what I mean? It's you could go into something and be I'm not gonna be I'm not scared of this dog, and logically know you're not scared of it, but your body can still have a weird physiological thing happening where mentally you're just different.
Yeah.
You know, because of something that happens.
And fear is crazy. You can't really choose when to be afraid, and it's just a conditioned response. And I came back to work probably before I was ready.
Yeah.
And that day we were doing a social, and there was a little scuffle.
Oh no!
And I just remember that I went home and I was I don't know if I can work with dogs anymore, because that sent me right back to just being so traumatized, and I was I have to pull through this if I want this as my career. I have to be strong, and I did, and I eventually got back to it, and I think my confidence level is returned. And that experience, although it sucked, I don't know if I would have changed it.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's what we were kind of talking about. It was a good lesson to be learned, you know. Something you're taking away, and I'm sure you haven't done that again.
Yeah.
So. I think most of I think everyone's first time they get bit is usually like, I don't know. At least for me, like my first time I got bit, it was eye-opening to be like, oh, like there's dogs are like capable of doing way more than maybe I anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And my first bite was not extensively bad or anything like that. I've honestly been pretty lucky where I've only had like one really bad incident, but yeah, it's more so eye-opening because you're all like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and part of the dog world, and you're excited and passionate and pumped, and then you get nailed the first
Things
time.
are going so well that you're getting a little bit too confident or too
I got bit on my
stuff.
first day of working in like a dog facility, and I was putting a dog. I was a kennel tech. I was putting a dog back into a kennel, and I wasn't told. I guess this dog notoriously, like, you just don't reach in the kennel, it's very difficult to handle type of thing. I wasn't told that at all. And so I take it in, put it in there, reach in, take the slip lead off, and just nailed me right on the hand. And what's funny is that she bit me like right on the thumb, and I had like a gash underneath, and then a big puncture like right behind my nail. Yeah, right at my nail, which was really fascinating because when my nail grew out, it grew out with a hole. I didn't.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that because I was bit like way back here above my knuckle. So it's like I didn't know your nail went all the way back there. But it does apparently. Yeah. So when it grew out, I just had this big black ugly hole in my nail for a few months as it was growing. But on that one. Yeah, I mean, for me, my big lesson for that was just, like, not to be so, like, careless, I suppose. Just be more mindful of my surroundings. I also think that maybe that's a lesson learned I do think, you know, people need to be a little bit more mindful of giving people information about dogs, you know, and communication and stuff like that to keep other people safe, which I think maybe is a bigger topic of, like, we're all kind of on the same team of we're responsible for each other's safety, you know? So, like, I know that, like, when dogs come in that are either trained by any of us, like, I do, and I'm sure you guys do, I feel like an immense amount of, like, personal responsibility for how that dog is when they're boarding here and everybody else's safety, like, in turn of that. So, like, when dogs that I've worked with come in for boarding the first time that have aggression issues or handling issues or whatever, you know, I really feel like it's my job to make sure that, like, procedurally things are set up well, that everybody's aware of the dog and not, like, everything they need to know. Because obviously communication is super important with stuff like that. I think that was a big piece of me getting bit the first time, was just that breakdown in communication of letting people know about a certain dog or issues or things like that too. Communication
is certainly very important when you work in a facility or multiple people are handling the same dog. So I really like our system now that we're very in tune with each other, and we know even if a dog is somewhat sketchy, we're letting the staff know. So they can best go about handling this dog as safe as possible, or if the dog needs a little bit of a higher level of skill, that we're making sure that the dog is assigned a person that can give them that skill level and attention.
And not allowing them to just have those reactions unchecked, you know? And I think another thing for me too is doing it safely, but also making sure that, you know, like especially like the kennel tests and stuff they're doing for the first time, that they feel comfortable, right? Because it's not even that, like, I know this dog's fine or whatever. If you haven't ran it yet and you don't feel comfortable, then that can throw off the whole system as well, you know? So it's something where if it helps them with feeling more comfortable by having a leash on or helping them maybe run the first time or two, or just being there for them, I found that's helpful for the kennel techs as well. Yeah.
What was your first bite, Seamus?
My first one was right around when I first started training. We had this Rottweiler, and I think it was just as he was getting here, so it was like his first day, first 10 minutes or so of being here, and we were trying to get him into the crate, and we were just working the crate drills a couple times and kind of going in and out and everything, and he just put on the brakes one time, and I was, had already done this a couple times, so I'm thinking, if he just needs an extra little tug or something like that to get him in and motivate him in, and he did not like that. And so when I had tried pulling him the last time, and I went to go let go again, he grabbed my thumb, similar to kind of yours. He didn't grab it and do anything like that. It was just that, like, I'm not going to do this right now and you need to stop kind of thing.
Essentially, right? Like a correction that you would give
exactly.
another dog.
Right. But being the Rottie, it obviously made a little bit of a puncture and everything. So it wasn't too bad, but definitely, that was a very quick shock of reality. Kind of whoever said it, that
a humbling experience.
Right. That they do definitely have more to say, sometimes, and can be very persuasive, which makes, some dogs just so much scarier, I guess, to work with and everything. But yeah, the lesson the fast thing I took about that was that, just because something goes good 2 or 3 times does not mean that it will never go bad, And so that's something that I've always kind of taken away of, if the dog's coming in with certain anxiety or actual aggression or something like that, that you do need to at least somewhat be, responsive to that and take that into consideration, and not just assume that just because it went good 1 or 2 times that it's not going to be a problem, So luckily it was just a correction kind of nip, and it wasn't too bad, but that was the first big one for sure. That I had.
And even like being mindful in that situation of like the type of dog you're working with.
Definitely.
And like a Rottweiler is going to be a lot more willing to say like, hey, fuck off.
Right.
than like maybe a golden retriever would have in that instance, or stuff like that.
And it's something I remember too. The smaller dogs you don't have to be as strong. You can kind of be like, okay, this is gonna happen, right, or whatever. But him, it's like, I remember even the first time I did it, I was like, had my whole arm in. And so it could have been way worse because, you're trying to put all your weight into it. He's 80, 90 pounds and he's just kind of putting those brakes on. So it's something where, it could have been a lot worse where, trying to push a dog that big of size and just that breed specifically could have been, if he wanted to. And that's why it was like, it was very humbling, because if he was actually a mean dog, it could have been way, way worse. But luckily he was just kind of annoyed with me and told me.
A toddler having a tantrum.
Exactly, right. Right.
Which, when you feel that amount of like physical power, and even just when they're not even trying that hard, that they can do that, it's like very eye-opening where you're like, whoa.
Oh,
yeah. Dogs are like powerful, man. Those dogs can really do a number on somebody.
Like I always think of like Tiger King at that point, where like they were working with these like tigers that would and then the lady was sticking her arm in the cage
and just ripped it off like nothing.
And he's like, I will never financially work.
Oh my gosh. Tiger King in COVID feels like a fever dream at this point.
That was such a crazy time.
I think about that show all the time, and I'm like, we're not working with tigers, obviously. I'm not comparing tigers and dogs, but you're working with an animal that could potentially do you a lot of harm, and you have to be aware of that and have to have a game plan of how you're going to approach that, and you can't rush those things. Like, you can't rush through. And in my in all of our experience, it may sound like we were rushing a little bit.
Yeah.
You were rushing to get him in and out of the crate. I was rushing to get the run started. You were rushing to get a slip lead off. And just like, you have to have this like going slow without hesitating kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Again, kind of reading the body language, understanding the reason why this dog is getting trained, you know, and putting that into consideration. Yeah. To keep, you know, obviously you safe as well as the dog.
Yeah. I think the second time I got bit was probably the worst situation because I got attacked by a German Shepherd, like multiple bites. And that one was, I think to me, that situation was probably the most humbling in the sense of like the physical power I felt behind the dog. And then also, again, I think it came back to just ignorance on my part of just like, again, underestimating like what a dog is like truly capable of. And so that situation, the dog was getting dropped off for boarding. It had, I think, been trained previously with the company I was with, but we hadn't seen it in quite some time. There's nothing in the history or the notes or like anything about this dog about aggression or anything like that. At the drop off, they asked like, is the dog aggressive, you know, whatever, nothing. I take the dog from the guy, he leaves, goes away. And as soon as I take the dog, I believe I went to like adjust the lead on it, or all I did was like something like that, and that was all it took, and it set the dog off. And I got bit like a few times on my arms, my legs, stuff like that. And one of the other employees was able to come up and grab the dog off, and he whipped around, he bit her right on the shoulder. We all were just getting maimed. We got him put away and then cleaned everything all up, which I'm very lucky because I don't even think I went to get antibiotics or anything. I just like flushed any of the punctures with like a syringe thing with like hydrogen peroxide and just tried to clean everything out really well. And then we ended up calling the owners to just kind of like pick their brain on this dog. And I remember calling, and I think it was our kennel tech actually called. The wife picked up, the husband was the one that dropped off. The wife picked up the phone, and she was like, I was just calling because I just wanted to clarify that, like, you know, the dog, when your husband dropped off, he said he didn't have any history of aggression issues or anything like that. And literally, like, that was all that she had to say, and the wife was like, what did the dog do?
Jeez.
Did he do it again, is what she said. And we're like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you're just not even going to tell us that your dog has these issues now, even when we directly ask you. So that was super frustrating. And again, like, yeah, that's again information that we should have been told, but also like, it just goes to show again that you can't just trust people's word.
Exactly.
That was the biggest lesson I learned was like, yes, I do think that owners know their dogs the best and they live with them, they understand, but when you're in dog care, you have to take their word with a grain of salt because they're typically going to paint their dog in the best light that they possibly can, usually. And I remember, like, I encountered that so much where it was like, I found myself having to tell clients, like, don't lie to me. Like, I'm not going to judge you for what your dog does. Like, I'm not here to, like, oh, you tell me your dog's bitten 5 people. I'm not going to shame you on that. I just need to know.
Right, that's why they're here.
I want to let us know. Because I need to know how to go about this safely. I don't want to get bit any more than you don't want him to bite me, but if you don't give me all the information, then I can't help you in the best way that I could.
Right.
So I think that was like the most power I felt behind a dog, where I ended up getting bit. There was another Cane Corso that bodied me real hard one time. Thankfully I didn't get bit. That was another one.
Is that the one you get smacked in the head?
Yeah.
No, too.
Yeah. He like chased me down the kennel room at the last place I worked. All simply because like the tech had him in his kennel and was like taking off the slip lead as I walked by, and it was like the big built-in type styles that we have here, and he busted out of the kennel past the kennel tech and just charged at me all the way down the aisle, and so I was like moving backwards away from him, and then I ended up using like my knee and my shin to like weirdly like push him up against the side of one of the built-ins, because the hallway I was in was only about, I don't know, like this big. So I was like smushed on one side and he was like smushed on the other side, and then I reached over and like pulled the pin for the door. So the door opened behind him. Yeah, and he like fell backwards in it, and then I slammed the door shut, and I was just like, what the hell? Like, what in the world? That one was probably the most like shaken up, because of like I wasn't even interacting with the dog to where I was like ready for something like that to happen.
Yeah. Completely off guard,
Yeah, but those are the moments where I was like, yeah, these dogs are strong.
Yeah.
they're strong, man. And I'm tiny.
Right. That was my second one was similar. It was a German Shepherd and a smaller German Shepherd. And I was trying to, again, kind of rushing, because I had to send home and they're waiting in the lobby and stuff. And so I'm trying to I just finished the session with this dog, so I'm just kind of rushing. And she did kind of resource guard her crate a little bit, had some really get reactive kind of when you would either close the door or open the door. And, I'm just kind of speeding things up, and I get her in and I go to get the leash off, and she kind of like creeped out of the door. And so I tried kind of just like closing the door with my foot or with my hand, I kind of forget, and she came fully out. She kind of like lunged at me, and it was just like where my hand was or whatever, she had gotten a good hold of my hand, and that was something that was like really scary, because it happened like that,
So
and it's something, where again, it's something that I've worked on this, and she was pretty good with it, but I think it was just, again, the speed at which I was going, just kind of spooked her or set her off or whatever it was, and she got a good nip in my hand, and to the point where I had to kind of like take a minute, because I was feeling a little woozy.
Yeah.
Because
the adrenaline dump afterwards.
Yeah. And I got up and I was just kind of like walked over and I sat down for a second, and ended up being fine, and and my hand was okay and still got all my fingers. But it was something that was something that I left that day and was like, okay, that's what we're focusing on a little bit more, because clearly it's she's not over it yet, So, so that was always something that was like one of my most recent, but still probably the most intense, and again, just being a little scarred from it. She had one other situation, I think, where she like kind of redirected on me because of a correction, or I forget what was happening on it was on the floor, and she came at me, and usually I'm pretty good at kind of like controlling the situation, and I remember she backed me up right into the wall, and because I was just like a little sketched out still, a little traumatized, and it was something that, again, that fear just took over. It's like usually even with her I could kind of like hold my own or try to figure out what to do, how to deal with it, but it was just like that second, and because of how fast it went, I was immediately like back to the wall. And luckily that nothing happened. She just kind of was like trying to be intimidating.
She's like, haha.
She goes, now I know. I got you.
I got you.
And that's such a powerful thing for a dog to know. If they know that they can,
they got your number.
Yeah. If they know that they can do it, it's very easy for them to try to do it again. And so that was like one thing I definitely took away from that as well. It's just being able to kind of like control it and manage the situation's a little bit better.
And come out back on top, where the dog's like, I can't do that anymore.
Yep, exactly. And that is how it ended, and she's doing great now. But
yeah, good for her.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, where when dogs know that they can push certain people or physically control a certain person and they're successful, they're much more likely to do it again. Absolutely. Which is why we see in this industry that we hear, oh, they go after my wife, they go after my husband, they go after my kids, because they've identified that person as an easy target. Mm-hmm. So, like, for an example, my second major bite was with a dog that had extreme barrier reactivity, and I reached over to close the kennel door because it was opening, and he latched onto my arm, and again, felt like slow motion, and I don't know how long he was on my arm for, but in that scenario, it was like door closing, and we controlled the situation pretty easily. It was very, very shaken up because it was, I think, a 120-pound dog, which easily could have killed me.
Yeah.
And I remember that adrenaline you feel, like, for some people, like, it's the worst feeling because, like, I feel like I'm a tough person, but you feel like you're on the verge of tears at that point because it's just like you can't physically control it.
Again, I think it's just like a physiological thing.
Yeah.
Like you truly can't control whether it's going to happen or not.
Yeah, and with that specific dog, because that incident had happened, he and I had this like weird relationship, and I was out in the yard a couple months later, and I went to close the gate, and I was by him, he was on muzzle, and he lunged up at me and pushed me to the ground, and I'm like, fell backwards, and luckily Seamus and another trainer were with us at a time, and they got him under control within seconds, but I felt like in that situation I had done nothing wrong, but in retrospect, the closing of the gate, the closing of the barrier is what triggered him, and because he had been successful of doing that to me previously, he's like, I got this bitch.
And it was he was waiting right by the door.
Yes.
And so you kind of had to go over his head to latch it. I remember that, and then he just...
And in retrospect, I could see that is a very clear signal that I should have picked up on, but you're going to be human sometimes, and I would have never thought that dog would have reacted that way to the gate closing initially. Right. And then the second time, I'm like, wow, I'm a freaking idiot. Like, how did I not see that?
Right.
But then you just have to allow yourself to be human and learn from those experiences. And moving forward, when we have dogs that are sketchy about that, I'm extra careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What other? Well, I guess how many times would you guys say that you've gotten like a substantial bite versus the amount of like years you've been training?
Twice for me.
And how many years you've been training?
I've been training for 4 years professionally.
Okay. I say that's a good ratio.
Yes. So 2 bites on my record.
Yeah. Yeah. Seamus, how about you?
Been training for like 3 years and I'm averaging once a year. I got 3 bites.
Listen.
3 breaking skin ones.
Breaking skin ones, yeah.
I've only had, I would say, like one one that I've actually had to go to like urgent care to get medical help or whatever.
Yeah.
But 3, I guess, breaking skin. So I guess however you want to count that.
Okay. I think I've been trained dogs for like 9 years, a little over 9 years. Obviously, I mentioned 2. I got bit at like an in-home consultation once because, again, I trusted the owners when they were like, our dogs are super friendly, they're not mean at all. And they opened the door and this little terrier comes and beelines out, zips right around me, and I had like a briefcase thing that I would take with me to use as a barrier in moments like that if I needed to. And right as I was trying to move barrier, because I was like, this little fucker is gonna bite me, I like wasn't quick enough, and he tagged me right on the back of the thigh. And I had like 4 holes, and then like this nasty looking bruise for a while. And again, that was another lesson for me to just like stop trusting what owners say about their dogs. Yeah. And he goes, oh, did he get you?
And you were like,
I said, yeah, he got me? What are you talking about?
Oh, he's just giving you a kiss. That's
what in the world? So what's that, 3? And then I feel like I said I had 5, but I can't remember the other one other than the most recent one. Yeah, the most recent one was Thor.
Mm-hmm.
That was the other one. That one was probably, honestly, my worst bite that I got out of all of them. That I actually went to. Yeah, because it was a lot of tearing, you know? The German Shepherd one was just mainly a lot of, like, punctures, which honestly heal a little bit better than, like, the tearing. With Thor, I think my lesson in that was just, like, because he truly wasn't necessarily trying to bite me.
Yeah.
He was just, like, thrashing around. We were trying to get a muzzle on him, and he was just, like, thrashing around. Because as soon as we would get to, like, I'd be able to finally get it on his face, but then trying to get around to, like, snap it was when you just start, like, just biting and everything. And so my lesson in that was just, I should have just taken the time to, like, put the muzzle on, like how we did with Thanos that one time, and not be so hands-on with it. But I was just kind of in one of those moods where I was like, just let me put the muzzle on. Right. Just wanted to do it. Which again goes back to, like, slow down, take your time, it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, he nailed me right on the pinky and pulled off, like, a big, nice, flappy piece of skin. Not to the extent where, like, they were still, like, and it scarred a decent amount.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it scarred a decent amount. They didn't want to stitch it, though, because with animal bites, they're like, if we can avoid stitching it, we really want to. So I had to wear, like, a stupid splint for a while so that it, like, so that it wouldn't bend and it would heal right because they didn't stitch it, and it was, like, a whole thing. But yeah, that one was kind of a similar thing where he like nailed me, and I knew he did, but I was also then trying to get him under control because then he was just, like, all over the place.
Right.
And Seni goes, "Michelle, you're bleeding everywhere." And I looked down and I was like, "Oh,
takes
no."
that big of a chunk out.
Yeah, and I was like, and you're in that adrenalized state, so, like, I didn't even realize that it was, like, that bad because you feel it.
Yep.
And you don't really recognize, like, oh, is it that bad, or did he just kind of, like, nick me or whatever? So then I ended up, then it was, like, 10 minutes later, I was like, I need to sit down. Yep. I remember I, like, had my hand over the trash can, and sweet Jada's just, like, dumping hydrogen peroxide all over it, like, rinsing it out, and then I had to walk past, I had a lesson waiting for me in the lobby, and I walked past him with bloody paper towels, and I'm like, I'll be right back.
That was the same thing with the sink home. Like,
and then I went, and when I finally looked at it in the sink, I was like, oh, I don't think I'll be right back. I had to go deal with that. So that was that one. Again, and that was my most recent one, and I think, because I had a pretty big gap. I had, like, my 2 bites right in the first year I started training, and that kind of, like, you know, the humble pie I needed, where then, like, I was good, and I think now, if I get any bites now at the stage I'm at with 9 years of training, it's just because I'm being a fucking idiot. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just, like, maybe I'm being too confident, or, like, again, kind of overestimating and underestimating the dog at that stage, or, you know, whatever it might be. Because at this point, it's like, you should know better than to get bit by a dog.
Things always happen, and situations can happen in a split second, so people still get bit even with, like, 20 years of experience. It just, there's freak accidents that happen. But with your professional and skill level, they should not be happening often, which it's just kind of, you learn from each thing that happens. It's hard.
Do you guys have any other situations that you can think of that were impactful? Bites or not, I suppose, where maybe a dog just, like, threw you for a loop?
I can think of the most recent one was Oakley.
Okay.
And that one session, it was our second session. And in the situation, we had just introduced the muzzle, and we just introduced the e-collar, and Oakley said, what the actual hell? And he did not bite because he had the muzzle on, but he was climbing me, and he's climbing the owner. And this dog was enormous.
Easily
He's
100 pounds.
Thick boy.
Yeah.
And he had a history of having an incident with a guest coming into their home. And I was very, very bruised up from that. And looking back, I was speaking with David, and I was telling him about the situation, and he's like, point out what you did wrong there. And I was like, oh, I can see what I could have done.
Yeah.
So moving forward, when I'm working with a dog of that caliber, I'll definitely be doing things differently.
Yeah.
But it was very new to the process, which is not an excuse, but is a learning lesson for me.
He was a very unique dog. He was a really unique dog. Yes. I think he was one of your first, at least since you switched to private lessons, maybe, that you really had to like think outside of the box a little bit for him, because he was because even in the sense of like his physicality versus the physicality of the owners, you know, them being a little older with such a big, powerful dog like that, you know, that can be really difficult to manage safely. Yeah,
and like leaving that lesson, it was very discouraging for all of us, but by the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th lesson, this dog was shining star, nailing everything we've asked him to do, complete 180 turnaround.
Yeah.
And it goes to show you that if you struggle in a session, keep working at it and keep finding new solutions. Get creative and see what you can come up with. If you have colleagues to collaborate with, do that. And you can kind of see what could be done differently and more safely next time.
Yeah. I was thinking of, maybe you guys have some, I just thought of one, maybe times that like you did trust your gut and did something like an extra step or something as an extra precaution, and it turned out that like, yeah, you definitely should have done that because it worked out in your favor. I was thinking about Doppler specifically. I mean, you guys have probably seen the video of him attempting to maul me for like his entire first session. There's a very small amount of it in that vlog that we highlighted in, but literally he did it for probably 40 minutes. Like, he was a very persistent fellow. My entire forearm, so like this whole forearm, because I was holding his leash in this hand, was black and blue. He nailed me right here. I had like a little bruise on my neck. I had bruises all on like my torso, my sternum. Like, he was a serious guy. And he was one where in that first initial lesson, I was like, because mind you, he's never bit anyone because these owners were on top of it. Well, that's a lie. He did nip, not a big extensive bite, but he did bite. They had a guest come in their house and he did bite somebody then. But beyond that, I mean, they've kept him isolated. They took him out for walks at 3 a.m. They did like all the crazy, wacky things that people will do because they love their dogs so much and they know that they're dangerous. So like they took all the precautions, but he really didn't have an extensive bite history to where I was like, oh, I should definitely muzzle him. So I remember Paige, we walked inside and I was like, you even asked me, you're like, should I film the rest of it? Do you remember that? You're like, do you think this will be good? And I said, well, he either won't bite me at all once I take the leash, or he's gonna maul me. I said, those are our 2 options probably. And you were like, are you gonna muzzle him? And I said, and I was still like in my head, like, do I really need to? Because most of the time with those dogs, when they're like launching, going crazy, as soon as you take the leash and the owner walks away, they got nothing to do about it. You know what I mean? Like 95% of them. But in my head, for whatever reason, I was like, you know, today's not the day. I'm going to have him put a muzzle on him just in case. And then that happened.
Thank God.
Yeah. And then I was like, you know, God bless. I'm so glad that I trusted my gut and, you know, took that extra step just to make sure that everybody was safe. Because that could have gone very bad very quickly.
And there's nothing wrong with starting the dog on muzzle, and as you're getting to know it, especially as you're handling it. There's another trainer, it was a podcast recently, he's like, muzzles make you lazy and make you like not aware of the things, and I was like, what an odd perspective.
It is.
And just kind of frankly unsafe. If that person felt that was working for them, you know, go do it. But I think one thing you told me is like, when I started private lessons, is you're like, never be afraid to either not handle the dog in the very first session if it's that severe, or have them put a muzzle on the dog. And you can build a relationship with the dog over time, and it's not that we're neglecting the issue, but we're doing it in a safer manner.
That's a great way to think about it.
I think some people, their ego gets in the way. For whatever reason, using muzzles is like a weird ego thing for people. And it's
and recently, I can't even remember who it was, but I recommended, as your dog had some reactivity on the walks and everything, and even with like guests coming over and stuff, and so I said, put the muzzle on. At least it'll keep, worst case scenario, they break the command, and they do try to bite someone, muzzles on, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, well, doesn't that look more intimidating? And I was like, well, maybe, but would you rather the muzzle be off and potentially attack someone, or it be on and everyone be safe?
Yeah.
And even that, they were like, oh yeah, I guess I didn't think about that. I'm like,
there's a stigma.
Because there is, there absolutely is. Yeah. And so I even just kind of explain the situation. They're like, oh yeah, okay. So it is weird how those stigmas can have such a.
Yeah, this before I was in really understood training. If I saw a dog on a muzzle, I was like, they have no control over their dog. That's why they have to muzzle it. Mm-hmm. And now I look at it and I'm like, you're responsible.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't think of a situation necessarily, just speaking on muzzles and stuff. Mm-hmm. The only situation that really come to my mind, at least right away, is grooming, nail trim, stuff like that, where there's been times where I'm like, all right, this dog's fine, it's never really been a problem, but it's like, I'm just going to put it on just in case. First time, just evaluating, let's see. It is a common thing that dogs don't like their paws being touched or nails being trimmed. So let's just see. And then I saved my face because I put it on, and the second I grab the paw, they turn into a whole different dog, Yeah. And again, it goes back to just because they're really good in one aspect does not mean they're going to be good in another. Right?
Mm-hmm. And looking at it as if you were handling issues, it's the muzzle is not a defeat. It's if your dog bites me, then I have to stop the nail trim. I have to stop the handling because I'm injured or you're injured
or scared.
If we can prevent that and then have the dog be muzzled, and then they're realizing biting's not working, mm-hmm. the nail trim's not stopping, mm-hmm. and then that gives you a little bit more room. To help the dog work through those things rather Absolutely. Than feeling like I can control the situation with my mouth.
Yeah. And also, I don't know, I'd like to continue being a dog trainer for a very long time, and I'm not about to, get messed up to the point where, I can't anymore, Yeah. That's always been...
lose your leg.
Yeah. That's, always been very scary to me, where it's, that's why I do try to be as cautious as possible, is because, especially the amount of damage that some of these dogs can do.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not willing to take that risk at all.
Yeah, and even in my personal life, my friends that aren't in the industry, they're like, why are you acting scared of my dog? And I'm like, I'm cautious because I know what dogs are capable of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And my friend had her dog on her lap, and she's like, give me a hug. And I'm like, I'm not reaching over to give you a hug when your dog's on your lap. And she's like, he's never bitten anyone. He won't do it. And I was like, give her a half hug.
How many times have you heard that?
And he was like,
yeah.
See, I told you. Yeah. So I'm not scared of dogs. I'm cautious of them because I know what situations can trigger a bite. And I'd rather avoid that and stay confident in my handling skills than to have something knock me down.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then have to dust myself off and get back up again. Yeah. One time, what if I can't get back up again? Right. You know? Mm-hmm. It's not worth it.
And that goes back to me talking about my first bite with the Roddy. It's yes, obviously, even a small bite from him can be something. It does not mean that little dogs cannot be vicious as well. It's I think that a lot of people do that as well. It's they see a Rottweiler and they're clearly okay, gotta be safe around Rottweiler. But then they see a little beagle, or something like Sunday, and you're like, oh, okay, and it's something where no, if she wanted to take a chunk out of your hand or something too, she very well could,
Sure.
Or even the small pitties and stuff like that, that I think that's something that is very overlooked as well. Mm-hmm. And I think we've talked about this before, but I think that's why smaller dogs like the Chihuahuas and everything like that have so many bites over, they have such that stigma of all right, they're gonna bite you, because people don't see them as like a vicious dog or something. You know what I mean? They kind of
they
like, they're like, oh, okay.
As a dog.
Yeah.
Just like
right, it's more of a toy.
It's
right.
like they laugh it off when they do that.
Yeah. Right, and it's something that's also something to keep in mind. You know, I've always kind of had that mindset because again, it's just something where you have to respect every dog that comes in here. But it's something that's something that I think a lot of people generally kind of take advantage of or just are just oblivious to. You know, it's just like okay,
until
well,
you've
go
been
get
bit by a dog. It hurts.
Yeah.
Dog bites hurt really
Maybe not initially when that adrenaline's pumping, but
they hurt.
you know, once that adrenaline dump goes down and you start feeling that throbbing pain, oh my gosh, a tooth just in your hand.
My husband got bit by a dog when we were out walking and someone's stupid off-leash dog charged and tried to attack one of my dogs and then ended up biting my husband on the hand. And he had like a couple punctures and it was real bruised and all this kind of stuff. And like over the next week he was like, this really hurts. I was like, I know, I'm not just a baby when I've complained about like pain from a dog bite. Like it definitely hurts, that's for sure. Because beyond like the actual wound aspect, like the bruising that comes along with it. That's why even like getting scratched by dogs sometimes can hurt really bad too. Like the bruising and stuff is terrible.
Yeah, like the pain is incredible. Like when in my specific incident, like I went home from the hospital and I was in excruciating pain. I was screaming on my floor, like screaming. My mom was visiting and Justin, it was real quiet. And the pain was so intense, I went back to the hospital and stayed for 2 more weeks.
Yeah.
And I had a wound vac on at the time, so that wound vac was sucking on my leg. So,
oh,
fun.
But that hurt.
Man, it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you get bit by a dog, even if it's something super minor, like you need to clean that.
Yeah.
So, not that you didn't. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but like, immediately. And like, if it's like a puncture, like what I've always done is like take like a plunger, like syringe thing, suck up some hydrogen peroxide, jam it in there. It's gonna hurt, but you gotta jam it in there and really flush out the whole entire thing.
That's what I should have done, and I think I waited several hours before I sought out medical attention for that bite, and that was probably the biggest downfall.
And that's I think a lot of people, they get a big puncture or something and they clean the you know, that's like
they don't go
clean
in there.
But they don't get all the way down, and that's where it all festers down in there and where the infection can start. So even just like washing it with soap and water, you know, you got to get it down there and immediately go get it checked out, because that is not something to mess with for sure.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So I remember when I even went to urgent care for this one, beyond what I had cleaned it with, they took big like syringe things and like shoved it way down in there, and like when they flushed it, there's all these like chunks of skin coming out. They're like, oh yeah, look at that.
Like I would rather not.
Yep. Thanks.
That's why I was with my hand when the German Shepherd bit me and got her tooth down in there, you know, and they had to like numb it and then wash it, and I would just, you know, I like to think of myself as a pretty tough person too, but I made my wife come with me. I was like, you need to come, you need to talk me down. If I start wobbling a little bit, I need you to grab me or something, you know. So, because it was rough.
Like,
it was rough.
It is a doozy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then as I was in there and they're doing all this stuff, the freaking doctor is like, so my friend has this dog that he's trying to rehome. Do you know anybody who wants a dog? And I'm like, sir, I'm just trying to get this fixed so that I can go home.
Trying to survive here, bud.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Bridget, what were you going to say?
Well, moving forward, how can you prevent a dog bite from happening? Slow down.
Yes.
Don't rush when you're in a situation. Have a buddy with you.
Yeah.
The buddy system is really important to have that extra support so things don't escalate further.
Or at least a muzzle.
A muzzle. And trust your gut. If something's making you feel uncomfortable, and because you're uncomfortable, your behavior may shift and change.
Yeah.
So it's okay to kind of take a step back and get some support with that.
I think reading the situation too, and thinking about all the situations that could happen.
Yeah, like all the what ifs.
Yes, yeah, because that was most of my stuff, is that like, again, the routine of going back to the rally, like I did it a couple times, and then the one time I was like, wait, we just did it a couple times, why is this being so difficult? And not thinking like, oh, well, he's gonna bite me now, you know what I mean? So definitely like read the situation, body language, everything like that, and put into all those situations into consideration. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay to be over safe.
It is okay to be over safe.
Yes.
It's not ridiculous at all.
Better safe than sorry,
Not
right?
at all. Yeah. So I think those are some good points to make. Is just to really assess the situation, take the time to take all the precautions you need. If you're working with clients, sometimes maybe it can feel like you're gonna offend them if you want them to muzzle their dog, if you want them to secure their dog, if you want whatever it might be. And again, I don't prioritize like potentially hurting their feelings, just trying to be safe. You know, I think that any logical person would want their dog to not cause harm to somebody.
It's worth explaining to them that why we're doing
sure.
this and everything. You know, if you can tell that they're like uneasy or comfortable or whatever about it, or offended, you know, but it's something where I feel like that too. Like even if they aren't against the stereotype or whatever, like having the muzzle on or having to put the muzzle on, it's just for the safety.
Oh yeah, and definitely taking the time to explain that to them and hopefully get them on the same page. And if somebody is like, for whatever reason, very argumentative about it, then maybe that's a good sign that like they're not in the right place to maybe work with that dog. You know, they're not ready quite yet to do what needs to be done to address the issues with that dog. But don't sacrifice like your ability to be safe just for that sake at that point.
Absolutely.
Well, cool.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Don't get bit.
Well, stay safe out there, kids.
Yes.
Yeah, and I wore my shirt today in honor. Stop petting strange dogs. That's the number one way you can avoid getting bit in your everyday life. Stop petting dogs.
I would never touch a stranger's dog ever again.
I don't have any desire to. None at all.
No.